As a kid, after getting into an argument with my dad would yell, "Don't F with me," or "I'll kick your ass." I was then sent to my room after those cruel words were spoken, and behind closed doors, I'd feel that familiar lump in my throat as I start crying and silently cuss him out while giving him 2 middle fingers, wishing he would die. It was with those interactions I was taught that expressing anger was completely unacceptable, and that the consequences of having it show through even a little bit would get you crushed. So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about my journey in repressing anger, how to know if you're repressing anger, and finding healthy ways to express and release anger, and how I'm getting free. Step 1, be honest about why you're mad. After being raised up with the interactions mentioned previously, I naturally learned that when I was getting heated, the appropriate response was to stop the feeling of anger entirely. This developed an unhealthy way of handling conflict. When I did let out my anger, it came out explosive because of all the years of holding it in. Neither is acceptable, nor is it the standard that we should live by. If this has been your pattern, one effective way to stop the pattern is to ask yourself a simple but honest question. Why am I actually mad? I recently shared my opinion on a matter with Charisse, and after hearing what I had to say, she was pretty quick to say she didn't agree, and sort of in a way that made it sound like what I said didn't make sense. Now, inwardly, I felt an anger that reminded me of the latest Super Mario Galaxy movie when Minnie Bowser reacts to Mario's insult of his painting, saying, "How dare you look at my masterpiece and say that? I'll burn the skin off your bones." I didn't want to do that to Charisse, but I was still burning inside. Because of my former habits of were to suppress anger until it comes out explosive, my first temptation was to suppress the anger. However, I got tired and fed up with where this has gotten me, and I did something different. Instead, I took a moment to look inside and see what the reason was for why I was angry. And I realized it was because I thought that she was saying that my thought was dumb. Suddenly, I didn't feel the two bipolar feelings of "don't be angry" or "scream, shout, let it all out." I felt ready to have a conversation and not an argument. When you feel anger, stop and ask, "Why am I angry?" Then search your heart honestly. When you have the answer, take ownership and face it with courage. Even if the answer is not a flattering one, even if it's rooted in jealousy, insecurity, or something from your past, don't immediately say, "Oh, I shouldn't feel that way." Acknowledge what's actually there, and when you do, you will move from being controlled by your anger to being in a position to do something constructive with it. The emotion stops being the one that's in charge. You are. Step 2, use that anger as fuel to build. Okay, I know why I'm angry. I was honest with myself, and I see what's going on. Now what? I'm still mad, and nothing has happened to make my situation any better. One time, Charisse and I were in an argument over the YouTube channel. She felt I wasn't pulling my weight, and after that conversation, I was fuming. The problem was I knew she was right. The apathy and lethargy that I once felt burned away, and I had to come face to face with the truth. And to be fully honest, the anger to prove her wrong became fuel for me to get started. And since then, everything has changed for the better. And my involvement has been more than it's ever been. Ask yourself one question. What about this situation can be used for good? Sometimes it looks like confronting injustice. Sometimes it means speaking a hard truth in love. Sometimes it means recognizing that the anger is pointing you toward a boundary that needs to be drawn, a conversation that needs to happen, or something in your own heart that needs healing. Anger is a powerful emotion. And like any power, it can be used to build or destroy. God wired you with it for a reason. The thing is to ask yourself, what about this anger? What is this pointing me toward that I can use to make something better? Step 3, release it in a healthy way. Even when we've done the inner work, we've figured out why we're angry, and we've decided we want to use it for good, we still have to deal with the feeling itself. Anger doesn't just disappear because we've thought it through. We need to find a healthy outlet, or it will find one of its own. One time, Sharice and I got into a heated argument just before I had to take our daughter to school. And on the drive home, I called a friend who is my prayer partner. I shared with him what had happened and why I was mad. He began to tell me what he felt the Holy Spirit was showing him about the situation. And after offloading what I was feeling and hearing what he had to say, I felt so much better. We prayed together, and then I apologized to Sharice for where I had disrespected her during the argument. Talking to my friend made all the difference in giving me the chance to cool down and gain clarity on how to move ahead. Find your outlet and use it intentionally. And that might look like workout, where you're letting out physical energy. It might be writing it out to God in a journal, releasing what you're carrying onto the page. But I found that talking things through to a safe person is one of the most relieving and rewarding ways to offload anger. But possibly one of my favorite methods of offloading anger is to aggressively praise and worship Jesus. My experience turns into something you'd see in the book of Psalms. And what was once a time of fiery emotion is now displaced with an atmosphere of praise. The key is that you release it, not suppress it, not explode, release it. Give it somewhere to go that doesn't leave more damage behind. And step 4, remember that you matter, but so does the other person. Particularly after we have decided to do a brave thing and make our emotions known, we can get so caught up in being validated and feeling like we are important that our thinking becomes one-sided and unable to see from the other person's perspective. This sort of thing happens to me more than I like to admit. On a certain occasion, I was communicating my feelings on a matter with Sharice. I don't even remember what it was about right now. All I remember is that I was holding fast to my side of things. And Sharice would also not give and kept on holding on to her side of things. I began having an incessant desire for my side of things to be heard and validated. I felt like an 8-year-old child who wanted to kick and scream until I got what I wanted. While I was in the shower trying to decompress from our argument, I felt so angry that Sharice didn't hear my side of the offense. I was convinced that she was wrong, undeniably wrong. I began to think that I was the victim of being right and she was pridefully wrong. Thinking that if this marriage ended in divorce, it wouldn't be because of me, but because of her unwillingness to yield to the truth. Yikes. If you're unfamiliar with demonic principalities, this is where the Leviathan spirit loves to work. Through pride and being convinced that you are right and being willing to see another person hurt if they don't accept your way of thinking. This calls for humility and the power of the Holy Spirit. After I validated my own feelings and also considered that she was equally deserving of the same treatment that I was seeking, things got much easier. And we were able to have a constructive conversation that ended in reconciliation. Before you walk into a hard conversation, or even just before you respond, set your heart for a win-win. Your feelings are real and worth honoring, and so is the other person on the other side. When you go with that posture, everything changes. The tone, the outcome, and the aftermath. So overall, anger can be a powerful driver when it is used wisely, in a way that brings us to action, driving us to good, godly action. Honesty with self is crucial, having no pride but abundant humility, and always keeping God's standards at the forefront of our minds. When we do this, and with the Holy Spirit empowering us, I know we will become a powerful force to be reckoned with. Which of these steps is the hardest one for you? Is it being honest about why you're really angry? Finding a healthy way to release it? I'd love to hear from you in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one who's had to learn this the hard way. And there's so much power in knowing that we're not alone. Also, if you found yourself on the losing side of anger and you are giving into it and struggling with feelings of guilt, I would highly recommend you watching my wife's latest video on Is God Tired of Forgiving Me? We're here to help you and would love to encourage you any way we can. Love you and God bless.